July 30th, 1864. Petersburg. A mine explodes beneath Confederate lines. History remembers the chaos, the failure. But history lied. What happened inside that hellish pit, the true horror witnessed by the men who charged first, was buried. Buried with the dead, buried by shame, buried by time. Until now. This is the eyewitness account they never wanted you to hear. The story of the 14th New York Heavy Artillery, flung into the unknown, commanded to charge blind into a nightmare. They saw comrades vanish in an instant. They fought trapped men buried alive. They witnessed unspeakable carnage from both sides. And they faced a truth so dark, so shocking about the Battle of the Crater, it changes everything. This is not just history. This is the dark narrative one soldier, George Kilmer, could not forget. Prepare yourself. The crater awaits. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. The designation of forces to spearhead the charge was finalized just before the critical hour. Nevertheless, the day's strategies and objectives were not disclosed to any enlisted man beneath the grade of field officer. There existed signs of imminent action that the rank and file readily discerned, like directives for additional provisions. The gathering of soldiers and the formation of battle lines near the adversary's defenses before Cemetery Hill. The distinction of heading the assault fell by rotation to the brigade commanded by Colonel E.G. Marshall. Overnight, his regiments were positioned approximately 20 yards from the mine, where only a solitary breastwork, an old Confederate structure, lay twisted between them and the fortification. The state of this defense was not indicated to the troops, nor were they informed about what would transpire or what would be demanded in the imminent crisis. The men drowsed and rested for several hours before dawn, anticipating events. Abruptly, the ground quaked, and a dark pyramidal mass was propelled skyward, so proximate that it appeared as it expanded after its ascent ended, it would descend upon and envelop those nearest. It proved so alarming that the foremost two ranks scattered, convinced it was a seismic event where a Confederate mine had been sprung against us. None had supposed a Confederate stronghold was that adjacent. The 14th New York Heavy Artillery, my own regiment, constituted the third line and was Colonel Marshall's personal command. With two lines ahead and their own commander's known presence to hearten them, these soldiers stayed relatively composed, though a brief interval of disorder did occur. The extent to which this disorder impeded the advance will become clear from the events of the initial moments. Lieutenant Thompson of Company B was heaved into a mud pit by the blast, and as he emerged, sightless and spattered, before his amazed soldiers, the cry resounded, "Advance! Advance, men, over those fortifications ahead, structures as tall as a man's shoulder." There existed no stairs or scaling ladders, so this unfortunate officer wiped muck from his eyes, echoed the command, and scaled the timbers, since the defenses then resembled a terrace wall more than a field breastwork. Certain soldiers thrust bayonets into the barrier to fashion footholds, while a few positioned themselves atop and assisted their comrades. When 20 Company B men had reached their lieutenant on the works, he directed them to form ranks, but Colonel Marshall shouted, "No moment for alignment, Lieutenant. Make for the summit." Thus it proceeded for the entire regiment, with only a fraction prepared immediately. These charged by company along the flank. Our guns commenced instantly, shells shrieking overhead, while bursts of smoke from the explosions and the gaping cavity created by the detonation veiled the scene and compounded the turmoil. Roughly 150 troops were near Marshall and the standards. More arrived, straggling forward as rapidly as they surmounted the defenses, and this small band executed the grand rush. At the crater, an angled pit yawned open, and on both flanks Confederates were now watchful, though not sufficiently composed for engagement. Within the pit, powder fumes seeped from fissures, partly buried firearms were visible, and the heads or limbs of interred men twisted to displace the unsettled soil. The instruction came once more. Proceed. A segment of the shattered defense persisted, and here within the adjacent breastworks, figures were observed. Ahead, past the cavity, a Confederate battery was discharging into the approach from our defenses, and a projectile severed a Company C soldier in two. The troops in the pit and nearby yielded or fled, and the banner of the 14th New York Heavy Artillery was planted beside the old fortification. The foe on the flanks and beyond regained composure near this emblem and commenced rifle fire. Our soldiers perceived vastly superior numbers encircling them, and even from behind they sustained gunfire, for traverses extended toward our lines that shielded men discharging across the plateau and back toward the crater. Still, the resolve was to press forward, and a rush was undertaken for a second breastwork. Here Confederates resisted. Some of our men closed so near that muskets were wielded as clubs, and Sergeant James S. Hill of Company C seized a regimental battle flag forcibly. The fusillade from every quarter was intense, and the men withdrew to the old fort within the crater. It now appeared to those present that securing the breach as a foothold for subsequent advances was wisest, for Confederates surrounded them, perhaps in strength enough to retake it. Colonel Marshall and several officers and men positioned old cannon and fired upon the nearest Confederates. By then, additional regiments had arrived, and the 2nd Pennsylvania Heavy Artillery from our brigade participated in this effort. General Hartranft, observing Marshall's men's actions, shouted, "The brigades behind Marshall's assailed the breastworks flanking the crater, yet they confronted cannon and rifles constantly, and as formations fractured, the troops inevitably reached the crater." Present on site were elements from multiple commands lacking an overall commander. Officers and soldiers both demanded clear instructions and objectives. Our brigade had penetrated the gap, but could not progress until the flanks were secured. The units dispatched after us to clear those flanks had been repelled and sought shelter in the pit. Complications multiplied every moment as Confederates gained boldness and intensified their fire. Every new advance by our reinforcements was eagerly observed, yet ultimately hopeless oaths arose as the repulsed formations retreated and crammed the overflowing cavity. The injured preferred entering the pit over returning to our lines because the route back was raked by enemy fire. After the initial hour, conditions within the crater became dreadful. Fugitives discovered projectiles fell there as outside, and many entering seeking safety encountered doom. The final rally occurred when the colored division advanced from our defenses in magnificent array, suggesting victory. The complainers were now silenced, and most troops formed up to advance. A minority vowed never to follow blacks or risk capture alongside them and turned toward our lines, but were swiftly driven forward again. Then the colored soldiers fractured and scattered, unleashing pandemonium. The most courageous despaired, and those distrusting the blacks voiced their sentiments openly. Some colored men entered the crater and met a dire end during the advance. Commands arrived to extract the men, yet the ground separating the pit from our defenses was dominated at every point by Confederate artillery and marksmen. The pathway was paved with corpses of the slain. The commander of the 1st Battalion, 14th Regiment, Captain Houghton of Company L, offered to guide his men back, but all chose to stay, and senior officers counseled everyone to remain. One scheme involved summoning spades and having 2 teams excavate trenches at each end for passage. Another proposed awaiting nightfall. Both strategies were preempted by enemy action. 2 or 3 small detachments attacked the crater and were beaten back. Still, fresh troops were approaching, making it clear the position must be relinquished. Captain Houghton observed soldiers attempting to return across to the defenses and noted that an artillery piece discharging case shot inflicted most casualties during the retreat. Following one blast from this gun, he set off and cleared its effective range before the next shot. Traversing the area, he encountered it so densely strewn with casualties that avoiding treading upon them was impossible. Upon reaching the defenses, he ordered concentrated rifle fire against sources of the fiercest Confederate volleys, partially suppressing them so a few more men returned safely. Colonel Marshall and General Bartlett were among those remaining in the crater who were taken prisoner. The ordeal of these men upon capture must be recounted from memories of survivors following lengthy imprisonment, ending only with the war's conclusion. Numerous scenes here stirred even the stoutest hearts. While debris from the blast hung airborne, human forms were discernible, instantly conveying to every mind a ghastly fate had befallen comrades. Upon one mound within the crater, a Confederate was visible struggling, his head and shoulders embedded and trapped fast. Our troops tried to free him, but were repelled by Confederate bullets. On either side of the cavity were vertical countermines approximately 50 feet deep, left exposed. Down one of these, a Confederate had plunged and lay there alive and groaning, yet no means for his rescue existed nearby. These countermines had been sunk straight down and deserted. Confederate prisoners revealed the fort had been crowded that night, for our activities opposite had been noted. An assault was anticipated and countermeasures prepared. The explosion, however, was entirely unforeseen. George Kilmer survived. He walked that path paved with the dead. He carried the screams of the buried, the stench of the pit, the taste of betrayal and chaos. Out of that hell, back to a world that would try and fail to understand. His account isn't just history, it's a raw nerve, a testament to the true cost when plans shatter, courage meets futility, and men are consumed by a nightmare they never saw coming. But the darkest narrative? It echoes in Kilmer's own words. Confederate prisoners revealed, an assault was anticipated, countermeasures prepared. The explosion, however, was entirely unforeseen. The Confederates expected an attack, but not the mine. What does that mean? What really happened that morning? Was the crater less a brilliant gambit and more a terrifying descent into a trap within a trap? Kilmer witnessed the horror. He showed us the abyss. The question remains, what or who truly detonated the darkness? What do you think happened in the smoke and the screams? Let me know below.